welcome to Retro Warriors episode 441. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by viable human Chris Saturn.
Hi, Justin.
Hi, Saturn.
How's it going?
It's going bad.
I will say that like your intro kind of sounded like you were who's that sad salesman on The Simpsons, Gil?
Yeah.
It kind of sounded like Gil doing the intro a little bit there.
Gil-like.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, Gil needs this.
Yeah, that's kind of how your intro was starting to sound there.
People that aren't in the Discord, that don't keep up with us or specifically me, Christmas isn't a great time of year for me, and this Christmas in particular is very bad for me for a litany of reasons, and it seems to be getting worse. So we are currently recording on the 22nd of December, so Christmas
Still plenty of time away till Christmas.
Just a couple days from now.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with a lot, and it sucks, and it's not awesome. So there you go. That's what's going on with me. My week, I'm about 20 hours into Trails in the Sky.
Nice. So like about halfway through-ish?
I'm in chapter 2, so I think I'm kind of coming up on halfway-ish.
I would say chapter 2 is about the halfway point.
Okay, yeah. So I'm doing side quests in chapter 2 right now.
Nice. That's the chapter with Chloe in it, right?
Is she the school?
Yeah, the purple hair girl.
It was like I guess it's purple.
Yeah.
In my head, I was going to say blue, but I guess it's kind of a purpley blue.
Joshua
anyway,
has blue hair.
What? Joshua has black hair. What?
Yeah, throughout the series, the art kind of shifts a little, I guess, because their hair both gets much more pronounced blue and purple.
Oh, his hair is. Maybe I just never look at his portrait.
Right.
Although I was looking at it earlier because I was like, "That's a dumb face." Yeah, and he was making a dumb face.
Yeah, you can replace all the portraits with the Vita portraits. There's a mod for that.
I saw that people had done that. Yeah.
A lot of people don't like those because they're more anime-y, whereas the original ones have a little more personality to them.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So I don't know what the hell happened to me in the last half of 2023, but I just decided I was going to play every RPG ever. I guess I don't know.
Just shoveling JRPGs in.
And every time I finish one, I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to be done for a while.
Where's the next one?
Let's do Trails. I got time for that. Fuck it. We'll do it live. So I'm going to put it this way. I want to enjoy the series because I habitually and regularly hear it referred to as like the greatest JRPG franchise of all time. I've seen people say that it is the best video game story. Now, these are people talking about the whole, like, as a series, the experience of the games as a unit, not any in one individual thing. But I hear it talked about in very reverent tones, the greatest video game story ever told, the secret best JRPG series of all time, etc., etc. And I was like,
I'm a big fan of the series. I don't know that I would agree with those specifically. I feel like it has one of the more interesting combat systems. Which is neat. It has a very interesting combat system that only gets more interesting as it goes on. And I do think it is the most interesting connected world with a fleshed out political system. And that's one of those things I really dig on. I like that whole interaction. The individual stories, some of them are great and some of them are really tropey.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how much you can handle that.
My problem is, I know that there are softer starting points. People are like, play Trail 0, play the first Cold Steel, and then if you really love those, maybe you'll go back to the first two. My thing is, once I've been introduced to gameplay-related quality of life changes in a game franchise, I won't go back. I'm like, no, these are good, and I like these, and I don't want to give them up, and I'm not. So I know in my head that if I don't play FC and SC first, I will not play them.
However, the Vita versions of Sky 1, 2, and 3 all have the quality of life improvements from 0 and Azure.
It's too late, Saturn.
Oh, right.
I'm 20 hours in.
That's true.
I will say this. I was reading. I almost quit the game 100 times so far.
I'm sure.
And the parts of it are just frustrating. The difficulty is really weird.
Yes.
Like it's just completely like it feels like it just decides everything randomly. It's like this battle's impossible, and this one's a joke, and that one's impossible again. And you're like, what is happening?
Yeah, Falcom had a weird thing with difficulty during that era, where they wanted all their games to be super difficult, but because it is a JRPG and you got to grind every now and then, everything can't be difficult, or you'll never be able to grind up.
Right.
So it's a little awkward.
It's been kind of strange. The story is I probably skip maybe 20 to 30% of the text boxes depending on what's happening.
So I will say this, the people that I know that love the story the most are the people that talk to every NPC in the game multiple times.
Right, because I know it's like you'll talk to a guy and then you'll talk to his brother in the next town, and it's like these continuous threads and sub-stories, and that's cool.
And you can constantly go back to the people after the most minor plot events, and their text will have changed.
And that's cool. But let me tell you where I skip. And it's a thing that the story in this game really likes doing, where they'll be like, you'll get new information revealed. Oh, you should look for a clue over at this place.
Right.
And then someone goes, oh, that place. Yes, we know about that place. And then the next person goes, well, should we head there now? And then a different person goes, I think now would be a good time for us to begin heading there. Would you like to come with us? Yes, I think I would. And so all of this, because in every dialogue, you hit a point where they're like, here's the information of the dialogue. Yeah. Now, everyone involved in this entire scene has to say something.
They all have to chime in
before we're allowed to leave. So, and sometimes it's just like, yeah, okay, let's go. And you're like, why did you fucking say that? Shut up.
See, I've learned that I'm pretty good at skimming that in my head to the point to where I just lump it all together and ignore it afterwards.
Yeah. Now I say skip, I hold the B button. And so you can kind of tell, you know, where you're like, all right, you see the first couple words and it's like, okay, I think, and I'm like, all right, that's fine. But, you know, I am interested in the story and the plot, and I like the characters. I think
have you gotten to the play in Chapter 2 yet?
I am just now at the festival.
Okay.
I'm right at the festival, and I was like, let me go do side quests before I go do the festival thing.
All
right. I'm enjoying the combat. Again, it's very ups and downs.
Yes.
Right? And it's
every Trails sub-series seems to have a different mechanic that you can exploit to make the combat significantly easier. Like in the more recent games, in Cold Steel 3, 4, and Reverie, it's break. And Cold Steel 1 and 2, it's delay. You can delay enemies to the point to where they never, ever, ever, ever have a turn. And it's just different in each one. I'm trying to remember what the cheap tactic was in Sky, because there is one. And if I remember it and I tell you, then every battle in the game is going to be negligible, except for a handful of bosses.
I'll say, as an experience overall, I am enjoying it. I'm finding some portions of it frustrating. The game is really big on like, no, you need to talk to this one person in this one room a specific number of times, and then leave and then come back and then talk to them a specific number of more times before we will let the story progress.
Right.
And in terms of like story progression triggers, that's probably the oldest school feeling part of the design, because it's very traditional in that regard as far as JRPGs go.
It's very mid-90s design.
Yeah, very mid-90s. Like, well, did you talk to them? Did you talk to them twice after you went to the tavern? And you're like, well, what? No one told me to. Well, you should have known. You're like, how would I fucking know?
By talking to everybody as many times as you can.
But I am enjoying it. I was reading some reviews because people have sold this game to me, not you, but just on the internet, as this is not a JRPG. This is half of a JRPG attached to a visual novel.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I saw someone writing a review, and they said something along the lines of, basically like, hey, if you want to sit down and play a video game, don't boot up Trails. Go play a video game. And then when you want to, like, you're in that mood where you want to kind of relax and experience a story, then go play Trails. And so what I've been doing is when I get in that mood where I kind of just want to sort of sit and watch TV, that's when I'll go play Trails. Not when I want to play a video game, I'll go play a video game. Trails is not a video game. It is a book that has video game trappings. And so, but I'll say that treating it that way has made it more enjoyable of an experience to me. So that's been nice.
Yeah, the translation team from Xseed that worked on those games, they have talked about their experiences translating them, especially by the time they got to Sky 3, which was the last one that they did. And they had become pretty attached to the series and the characters and everything. Yeah, but they also said that like each individual Trails game had more text in it than all of the other games they had ever worked on in their entire careers combined. It's just a shitload of text in there.
Yeah, it's it has been. I've been enjoying it, and I plan to continue it, and I hope to finish at least the first game. Yeah. I'm told that if I can get through the first game, it's smooth sailing because that's the roughest one to really sit through.
Yeah, it's really kind of.
I don't mean to say bad, but yeah, it's everyone's like, oh yeah, that's the prologue game, and I'm like, I'm sorry, your prologue is 50 hours long, and then everyone's like, yeah,
that's correct. it's the bubblegummy, popcorny, light one that is very story light because it's just introducing you to the world, the characters, the technology. And then each game after that also has a bunch of lighthearted stuff like that, but each game seems to introduce a darker element that sometimes gets just... Sky 3 has the darkest element of all. It is rough.
At the point that I'm at, there are vague notions of maybe some sinister things could be happening somewhere in the universe. Like that's kind of where, and I get the feeling that right about the time those vague notions become specific notions is when the game is going to end, is kind of what I'm expecting.
Yes, it is exactly when the game ends.
But I've already got the second one in my Steam library, so I'm dedicated to at least getting that far.
That's good.
But I have been enjoying it. It has been kind of a change of pace for me. I'm trying to sort of broaden my horizons in that regard as far as like sitting through, because this is
massive
my thing.
Walls of text.
Is like, I don't mind massive walls of text. I have an English degree, for Christ's sakes. I've been through a lot of massive walls of text.
True, yeah.
Let me tell you. But when I sit down to play a video game, I sit down to play a video game.
Right.
And
you're wanting the interaction, the agency.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like, oh, my entire play session was just me watching Joshua make googly eyes at this new character. And you're like, well, fuck, man, I wanted to play a game. So I've just learned that, like, if I want to play a game, it's Vampire Survivors time. Yeah, if I just kind of want to, like, experience a story, again, that same vibe when you're like, because I watch a lot of TV and I watch a lot of reruns. Like I will rewatch the same shows over and over. It's just kind of like comfort food.
Sure.
And when I'm in that kind of media comfort food mode, I find that's when Trails hits the best.
It's good.
And so it's just I'm excited to hopefully get through the last half. I'm making progress. I'm a little stuck today because I had some side quests that are a little weird. And let me tell you, reading guides for this game fucking blows. Oh, the guides are the worst.
I found one good guide for the first game. But the earliest games have the worst guides. There's some dude who started writing guides for the series. I want to say it was Sky 3. And all of his guides are perfect. It's always like, these are the exact list of items you have to do to progress the story. These are the things that are missable in this moment, and figure out the rest of it.
Everyone for FC that I found feels like I'm cooking a recipe and they didn't give me the ingredients list, and I'm just like, well, okay, they all assume that you're doing a perfect 100% achievement run,
right,
and that you have done everything and so it's really hard to just jump in and be like, hey, I'm just kind of stuck on this one point, how do I progress? It's really hard to track that down. But I think I have a bit of a system I think that I've worked out.
I think you're at the point where the story starts to pick up a little bit. It kind of is, yeah. The next city you go to after that is the technology city, and that was where I started to get a little more invested in it.
I'm hoping the cities don't get much bigger because just physically navigating the game is kind of hard for me.
Yeah,
it's sort of this weird perspective, and you spin the camera a lot, and it confuses me as to which direction I'm going a lot. So that's kind of hard.
What's funny is because Zero and Azure released first on PSP. They took away the ability to rotate the camera, so it's still the same perspective, but it's a locked camera. So because of that, everything is much easier to see because they know exactly what angle you're looking at everything at.
Okay.
So it made navigation
So they just
easier
don't
by
put you in
taking away
situations
things.
where you're stuck behind stuff and shit.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
It's if this is the, I don't want to say worst is a strong word. If this is the toughest game in the series to get through, then I'm excited for other games. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
If this is the slog, then cool. I'm enjoying the slog enough that I'm excited to get to the other side of it.
That's good.
What have you been playing? It looks like a shitload of stuff.
A lot of stuff. Because for me, the holidays are usually the quiet season where I have less stuff going on. There's vacations, there's free time. And also, it looks like my new job won't start till January at the earliest. So I have so much free time right now.
Also, you've got a new job. I don't think you mentioned that.
I do, yeah. I've got a new job, but it's not starting until January, it looks like. So
is this the overnight job? Or
it looks like it, yeah. It looks like it's going to be the overnight job. But they
Get to go
did
back
say
to
that they don't
nighttime
expect
Saturday.
me to be on overnights permanently, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Anyway, so I did pick up WarioWare Move It, which is the new one.
Yes.
And
okay.
I put it in my system and I powered it on.
Shake It. They have one called Shake It too, right?
Yeah, that was on Wii, wasn't it?
The Wii one. All right. In my head, I was like, Move It's not new, but it's all right. Next one is Bop It.
Yeah, right. And Twist It. No, they already did Twisted. So I powered it on, and then it immediately said, select your controller, and I kept hitting the button, and then I noticed at the top of the screen, it had a picture of a Pro controller with a little cross through it.
Oh, no.
Because it only supports Joy-Con, and I haven't charged a Joy-Con in forever.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
So I'm charging Joy-Con and not playing it. So I went back to Dragon Quest Monsters. Which
how is that? Because like I got through the prologue and was like, oh, that's a cool game, and turned it off and just never fucking went back.
The further I get in it, the more I am enjoying it. Like,
okay.
Gameplay wise, the actual gameplay loop, I am enjoying. The story and character interaction is fine. It's a little light, a little lighter than I wanted, but fine. The technical performance is bad.
Okay.
The frame rate
gets
wonky.
Yeah. It seemed a little rough even in the prologue areas. It just kind of, I think we mentioned it last time on the show, where it just kind of looks kind of bad.
There's an area that's like a candy area. It kind of reminds me of the Luncheon Kingdom from Mario Odyssey, where everything is made out of food and it rains candy.
Oh.
And
kind of town.
Anytime it starts raining candy, the frame rate drops to like nothing. And it's rough. I feel bad that it has such bad performance issues because gameplay wise, I'm really enjoying it a lot. And once you get to the point where you can start merging the monsters and making the new monsters out of fused monsters, that's where it gets really exciting. And I'm really digging on that. A lot of fun there. I did finish Like a Dragon Gaiden.
How was it? Like compared to, I know that 6 is the obvious comparison, but Ishin is the most recent other traditional Yakuza.
I would say it's pretty comparable.
Okay.
Whereas Ishin is built on an older engine because it was originally a PS3 game.
Okay. Well, it was a re-release. I forget about that. Yeah.
So this one is built on the same engine that 6 and Kiwami 2 were built on. So gameplay-wise, it feels the most like 6 and Kiwami 2.
Yeah.
And it, like they say that it is a Gaiden game, a side game, a short game, and I guess it is shorter than a lot of the other Yakuza games.
All the reviews are like, we just wish it was longer. And I'm like, Saturn's been playing it for like a month, so I don't know what.
I clocked in a little over 50 hours.
That's pretty long, man.
Well, several of the Yakuza games I clocked in over 100 hours.
All right. Well, in that regard, then
it is technically shorter than other games in the series, but it doesn't feel like a light game at all. Like the story is kind of breezy. If you skip all of the optional stuff and just beeline the story, I bet you could probably do it in 15 to 20 hours. But there is plenty of optional stuff in that series. That's always where the fun, goofy, dumb stuff is.
Yeah.
I will say that the ending, despite the fact that I knew exactly where the story was going to go and had to go, because the game is a Gaiden game to Yakuza 7, so it takes place during that same time. And so if you have finished Yakuza 7, you already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So even though I already knew what was going to happen, the ending is still just so bittersweet and sad. And there's a scene where Kiryu is just like bawling, and man, that hit me. It's just so sad. It's so sad, Justin. But other than that, I did start trying to play Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection again on my Xbox.
We did a show on that, didn't we?
I think we did do an episode on that.
Maybe. I remember playing a lot of it, and I remember you being lukewarm on it.
I was okay on it. But I'm trying it again, this time on the Xbox, because now it'll give me achievements, which give me dopamine.
Oh, see, there you go.
But it's still Ghosts and Goblins, so it is hard. But I am playing it on the not quite easiest difficulty, where you can still die, but you can take like 7 hits before you do die.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the sweet spot, to make it still feel like Ghosts and Goblins, but not be a giant pain in the ass.
I'm sure that's the difficulty I played it on. I don't remember, but I'm sure it is.
I did start trying out the story mode and the new DLC from Vampire Survivors.
Yep, I'm so behind on VS. I've got all the stuff downloaded, and every time I open it, there's so many new unlocks for me to get, and I play one round, and I'm like, all right, I gotta go.
Yeah. The new DLC is I don't get it at all because I'm not a fan of Among Us, but
I've never played Among Us.
Me either.
I don't even know what it is.
I think it's
just how millennial we are.
Right. I thought that it was a multiplayer game where you all like tried to figure out which one of you is the bad guy.
That's what I thought, like a social deduction game.
Right. That was my assumption. But this seems to imply that several characters have names and shit, which I didn't think would be the case in a social game. So I don't know. Maybe there's more to it than I know, and a lot of people will tell us that we're old people now. But no, it's neat. The story mode I like just because you start as Poe, the guy with the garlic.
Yeah,
and it's the very first level is Poe remembers the good old days, and it's just the first level but with less power-ups available.
Yep.
So it feels like a demo of the game or something. Yeah, and then the second level is Poe is snapped back to the future or something like that, and it's just the first level again, but with all the power ups. And it's silly and dumb, and I love it.
Yeah, I like the idea of the story mode. I mean, it's basically a mission mode,
right?
More accurate. There's not really much in the way of story going on.
It's a pretty light story,
but still.
And then I am getting back to Trails into Reverie now, finally. And I realized when I first started trying to play the game, because I had started this game right off of Final Fantasy 16 when that was new. Yeah. And when I started playing Trails into Reverie, as much as I enjoyed the story and the characters and the music and the atmosphere and everything, I found the controls nearly impossible when I first played it. Like, the camera was going everywhere. I felt like I could barely control my characters. Like, they were walking around way too fast, just being idiots.
Did you have the turbo button on your PC, the big classic?
Yeah, the big... Well, I had the game in turbo mode, but I played all of the Trails games in turbo mode the whole time because they're all slow as shit.
Right.
But even then, it still felt like it was very difficult to control coming off of Final Fantasy 16. And then I played Final Fantasy 14 for a long time and tried Reverie again, and it felt even harder to control. And now I've spent the last month or so playing much lighter games and less third-person RPGs, and I went back to Reverie, and now it feels perfectly fine. It feels normal again.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what hit it.
Very bizarre sounding.
So now I am going to go ahead and finish Reverie while I can still play it.
Great. Can you just summarize all the story between the Trails game I'm playing and the Trails game you're playing? Just
shit happens.
10 words or less? Oh, okay.
The end.
Let's do the news.
Okay.
First up, Japanese Mega Man Battle Network arcade games have been successfully ripped and made available to emulator authors.
That's good, because that's I know they were trying for a while to find those.
I forget how many Battle Network games there are. There was a shitload.
75.
I don't know how many there were, so I can't argue that number. So we'll just assume it's correct.
Right.
The Mr. N64 core can now boot all officially released titles for the console. Yeah. Keep in mind, we said boot.
Right.
It can boot them, which is still massive progress.
Yeah, and apparently the author of that core had only expected to be able to get one game to boot by the end of this year. And so the fact that he's able to get all the games to boot that's pretty good progress.
I've never jumped in on the Mister thing, and I'm kind of like waiting for the next generation of whatever the general purpose FPGA device is that's a little easier to configure, a little cheaper, and maybe slightly more powerful, like that's what I'm kind of like secretly waiting on.
Right.
Also, it's barely available, and all the special stuff you need ends up being like $400 altogether. So that helps. That helps me not get it.
Right.
But I'm excited at the concepts that are going on in the Mister space right now.
Yeah.
The original PC-8801 version of Xanadu has been surprise released on Switch with a basic English localization. So if you didn't like Fuzz Xanadu, like me, maybe you'll like this one.
So I picked this up just to check it out and see what it's like. And the title screen comes with a little manual that you can read. And man, does it feel like a mid-'80s PC game manual. And it's like, here is 100 different commands that you're going to experience throughout this game. Better remember them.
Yeah.
And this is what you would want to do in this exact weird scenario. Maybe it'll come up. You'll probably see it. It's one of those mildly obtuse things that you often saw in PC gaming of that era.
Yeah. Sega Force Mega, a fan magazine about Sega, is launching.
That's neat.
So that's
kind of the Sega version of Nintendo Force.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to think about it. Although they're not called Nintendo Force Saturn.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're NF magazine.
They're NF magazine for legal reasons.
Yeah.
Now this is because I couldn't tell if this was because this was a magazine before.
Was it?
Yeah. So Sega Force. Sega Force was a magazine, and I couldn't tell if they were like reprinting that old magazine or if this is So I guess this is a new mag. I don't know why I thought they were like redoing an old magazine, which they are, but it's new content. And I remember I went to pre-order it, but their website was so shit that I was like, I don't want to put my credit card in this. So maybe I'll PayPal it later. John Romero has released Sigil 2, so you can play more of that. I played Sigil. Did you play Sigil?
No.
It was okay. It was more Doom. At this point, there are so many Doom levels available on Earth that it's hard to remember any of them, individually. But it was okay. Sigil was an okay time.
Yeah, I just have so little interest in first-person games that I just skipped it.
Yeah. Capcom says more Resident Evil remakes are coming.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very surprising.
No. Was anyone like, maybe they're done? To be fair, the media, the gaming in air quotes media, were doing all this weird hand wringing about like what's next. They can't remake 5 or 6. Those games were bad.
I think it's more that 5 and 6 are still on recent enough consoles that you can still play them.
That doesn't fucking stop anyone anymore, Saturn. Look at The Last of Us. They don't give a shit anymore. They'll just keep calling it a remaster.
I'm still hoping they do Code Veronica first before they do 5 and 6, but I'm not holding my breath anymore.
Yeah. Video Game History Foundation has found and preserved concept art from the development of Mega Man Legends.
It looks goofy.
Yeah. It's okay. It's a goofy game, so that makes sense. Very goofy-ass game with a monkey. I don't know why. It's just very strange.
I could never get into Mega Man Legends. I tried it on PS1. I tried it on N64, and it just never clicked with me.
I never could either, and I also always wanted to, because I was like, what a cool idea. I want to explore the world of Mega Man, and then it just never clicked with me. Yeah. Free Radical has ceased operations.
It's unfortunate. And they didn't make an official announcement. They just updated their website so that it just says 404 company not found.
Yeah, we are done. Goodbye.
Right.
Yeah. Jury decides that Google has an illegal monopoly.
Yeah, specifically on the Android store.
Specifically on the Android store in the Tim Epic versus Mr. Google follow-up to the Tim Epic versus Apple lawsuit.
Yeah, Tim Apple.
Tim Epic versus Tim Apple.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What's the guy's actual name? Tim Sweeney. That's the guy's name.
Yeah, Tim Sweeney and Tim Cook.
We talked about this in the chat, so I won't rehash it here, but basically I think we're all glad to see megacorp technology companies getting kind of knocked down a peg, but what a weird way for it to happen.
Yeah.
And what a weird ruling considering the context.
Yeah, also considering how much more open Android is than iPhone, it's weird that they decided that Apple was totally fine and blocking any external applications from being installed.
Yeah.
But Google is not fine for allowing external applications because they don't pre-install them. Just seems very strange.
It was strange. PokePark Kanto opening in Japan. So if you want to go to a PokePark,
Pokemon theme parks,
there you go.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they're just going to remake the entire Kanto region, and you can just go.
And they're going to remake it in the entire actual Kanto region of Japan.
Yeah,
they're just going to remake Pokemon's Kanto region.
E3 is officially dead. They've announced that it is over. It's dead, Jim.
Really, they've been weekend at Berniesing it for several
while.
years now.
I said in the chat, I said something along the lines of, this is like when Nintendo Power was canceled, and I wasn't sad because I hadn't read Nintendo Power in years or cared about it, but the mental idea of Nintendo Power ending was upsetting to me. It's kind of the same thing here. Like, I don't think either one of us gave much of a shit about E3 for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you think back at times like Reggie introducing the DS and stuff.
Right.
Like that.
There are these cool
that
moments.
feels warm. But then you look at, the last few years they did have it, and it was mostly whatever
Sony's
Ubisoft and
10-minute
Activision
long
were putting
flute
out.
concert in the middle of
Right.
Everything Ubisoft ever did.
If they had gotten that flute guy from the Game Awards, that would have been something. But they didn't.
Right. You got. God damn it.
See, they just need to give that guy his own segment, and it'd be fine.
Game Awards flute guy was the best. If people don't watch the Game Awards, it's stupid and you shouldn't. But there's this one guy that plays like 7 different flutes in the orchestra. He's just
in the middle of one song too. He gets into it, man. He is
and at the
rocking
very
that
end,
flute.
Me and my wife were laughing so hard because at the very end, he pulls out a flute that's as big as him.
Yeah, it's like this super contra bass flute thing. And man,
and we were like, "Oh my god, it's huge!"
Right? Oh man, and he looks kind of like Wish.com Eric Andre, which only makes it better.
And finally, Antstream is adding a bunch of old Namco Bandai games. I forget Antstream fucking exists. Do people use this service? Is this a thing?
Xbox keeps recommending it to me every time I turn on my console. It's like, you can download Antstream.
Like when I don't even know what the hell it is. This is streaming, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a subscription. I haven't downloaded it either, so I am not the one to ask.
Yeah, I'm on the website, and if I didn't know better, I would say definitively this is a scam website that you should not put your credit card into. This looks like a fucking joke.
Yeah, that was why I didn't sign up the first time.
Antstream.com, this looks like old GeoCities. It has to be on purpose, but like not in a confidence instilling, let me give you my money kind of way. It just looks bad. This looks like the box art on the side of one of those like 10,001 video game.
It looks like an Evercade box.
It does. It looks weird. But you know what's not weird is our topic this week.
No, it's a little weird.
Which is, I believe, pronounced THQ, is the technical pronunciation of THQ.
Yes.
Which stands for Toy Headquarters.
Yes.
There. You don't have to listen to the rest of the episode. That's the gist of it. Yep. Toy Headquarters. And they made so many toys. We're going to tell you all about all of their toys that they made. That'll be so exciting.
Justin, how many times have you opened these notes before right now?
It doesn't matter. That's irrelevant data. I'm a busy man. Okay.
I just felt that we should
notes.
clarify that.
I opened notes. This will be a Saturn heavy episode. Yeah. I've been having a bad month, okay?
It's all right. It's all right.
Give me a break.
We're going to make it, Justin.
A lot of this info comes from the Golden Bolt on YouTube.
Yep.
So we do want to give credit where credit is due. That a lot of this information is directly from that channel.
Yeah.
So please go check out their stuff on THQ if you want to, learn more than we have to say about THQ. Historical info: they were founded April 1990 in Calabasas, California. Liquidated January 23rd, 2013. Liquidated.
That kind of spoils the ending, but yeah.
It does a little bit. I just love the phrase, take them to the liquidator to be liquidated.
They got turned into the Liquid Terminator.
As far as first encounters, there's a lot of THQ stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what my intro would have been, because they did a lot of licensed things.
Mostly licensed things.
I think I probably played some of their wrestling games at some point.
Yeah.
They did do some of the wrestling.
They did a bit of wrestling. They did a bit of SpongeBob's.
But not... Like, none of their stuff was something that was a beloved title on my shelf growing up.
Yeah.
They were just kind of this big, giant, like, licensed property warehouse company for me. So I never really gave them much thought, to be honest. What about you, Saturn?
It was probably about the same. Some licensed games on NES or Super NES that I probably rented at one point. And after having played them, I was like, I don't want anything else by this company. and just avoided their stuff for a decade until probably shortly before Saints Row the Third is when I gave them another shot.
Yeah. That probably is not too different from
I think I did play some Red Faction and Time Splitters.
Oh, yeah, I did play. I played a bunch of Red Faction 2 specifically, and none of the other Red Factions at all. And I also played a little Time Splitters too in the PS2 era.
Yeah,
when that was a thing that was going on. And then obviously we both love Game Boy Color Chicken Run, which is
clearly the pinnacle of their release history.
Legendary. Tell me about the early history of THQ and how we ended up with these people.
Yeah, so we have to start with Jack Friedman, who we have mentioned previously on this show back in episode 241, because he had founded LJN Toys back in the 70s.
LJN Toys.
You know it's going to be a good story when it starts with LJN.
Yep. Wonderful. We've done LJN, right? We did them early, didn't we?
Yeah, episode 241 we did LJN.
Oh, you literally just said the number a second ago.
Seconds ago.
I forgot it. I can't.
So, Jack Friedman, he was the founder of LJN back in the 70s, which, as we mentioned in that episode, he sold to MCA Universal, who then sold it to Acclaim, and Friedman left the company when it was sold to Acclaim. And he was, kind of floating for a little bit, wanted to do something. He's still really interested in toys, so he formed a new company in 1990, which he called Toy Headquarters, which the branding would list as THQ with a little dot between the T and the H. And originally, it was mostly licensed toys. They were just making toys. It was dolls and figures. The early successes were based on things like Home Alone or Vanilla Ice or Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates.
Yeah.
Which was not a good cartoon.
Which in some ways does make sense as far as why they were so heavily into licensed video games too, because one, they probably already had a lot of working relationships there, and two, it fits their brand. They're the people making the licensed toys.
Right.
Why not also make the licensed video games?
Right. So within that first year, when they were mostly making toys, they did buy a division of Broderbund, which helped them start work on some of their earliest video games. Their first games would release the following year in 1991 and were also based on licensed properties. In fact, several of those same licensed properties, though we never got a Vanilla Ice video game from them, and I am upset about that. Because
we did get a Vanilla Ice movie.
Oh, did we?
I don't know if they were involved at all. I doubt it. But there was a Vanilla Ice movie.
Maybe the toy they made was based on the movie.
Maybe. I forget the name of the movie. I was talking to Courtney the other night about it, and she was like, I loved Vanilla Ice. And I was like, did you see his movie? And she goes, his what?
There was always a rumor when I was growing up that he went to our high school, which was not true. He went to a nearby high school, but he did not go to our high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but maybe people at our high school knew him when he was still in high school, and that's how the rumor started. I don't know.
I do remember, I didn't play it back in the day, but whenever I was getting into retro gaming as a teenager and looking back at NES stuff, I do remember looking at one of their earlier games, which was Where's Waldo on NES. Because in my head, I was like, how the fuck do you do a Where's Waldo game?
Exactly how you think you do.
Yeah, it's literally just like find him in this picture of shitty Nintendo sprites.
Yeah, of shitty old blocky graphics.
And I don't. I think I booted it up once just to see, and I was like, yeah, it's just Waldo. But did they move Waldo, or is it the same static image like in the book?
I have no idea. I looked at the back of the box at Blockbuster one time and decided that was not a thing I was going to spend my rental on.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that game was developed by Bethesda.
Yeah. That's
Another in a long line of Bethesda's boring RPGs. Where's Waldo on NES?
For our European listeners, that's what we call Where's Wally. That's,
oh my God, they don't call him Waldo?
No, they call him Wally over there.
I didn't know that. My world is rocked.
Like, that's the most shocking thing.
That's what made him so memorable, is his name was Waldo. That's a weird name.
Yeah.
I gotta write this down. I'm writing it down to tell my wife later. I'm gonna forget what it means. I'm gonna be like, what the fuck is Wally and why do I need to find it? Where's Wally? I gotta tell her. I'm so excited. Anyway, THQ. Tell me about THQ 7.
Right. So they did start with those licensed games, like we mentioned. Then to fill out their library a little more, they started licensing some arcade games from studios that didn't publish their own home ports, notably Midway, before Midway did home ports. They did stuff like Total Carnage, were done by THQ. They also licensed a bunch of EA's games, as far as things like EA's sports games. They're big titles to port over to Game Boy and other platforms that EA didn't put stuff on.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, Nintendo had their weird rules back then. And one of Nintendo's rules was you couldn't publish a game on any competitor's platforms. So THQ formed two divisions. One was called Malibu Games and one was called Black Pearl. And Malibu would release games on Super Nintendo and Game Boy, and Black Pearl would release things on Genesis. And then Nintendo relaxed the rule like maybe a year later, and they immediately killed Malibu Games but kept using Black Pearl, including on Super Nintendo, which is just confusing to me, and I don't know why they did any of that. It feels like it was a giant waste and maybe a tax thing.
Most assuredly a tax thing.
Right? So then we have the new consoles coming. We have the PS1 and the Saturn and the N64. And they needed to invest more and more into the technology to make these newer games for these newer consoles. It wasn't as simple as a basic 16-bit game. And so they needed to increase their tech production, and to do so, they canceled their toy division just because they needed, the money and the focus. Right. And because Jack Friedman, the founder, was not interested in that, he left and formed another toy company called Jack's Pacific.
I know of Jack's Pacific.
Yes.
God, it's a hard... Jack's Pacific.
Right.
Jack's Pacific.
Right.
That's a different... Because...
they made a lot of the wrestling toys.
Jack's Pacific is still around.
They are. They are still around.
Like, they still make shit.
And they still make toys. They did not veer into the video game world like LJN and THQ before them.
And they have made toys for the Super Mario Brothers movie. So while they're not making video games, they're now making toys about a movie based on a video game property.
Nice.
Coming full circle. Anyway, sorry.
No worries.
Continue.
So through the rest of the 90s, you mostly saw more licensed games, ports, stuff like that. And the big success for THQ in the late 90s were their wrestling games, as we mentioned. Mostly at the time, they had gotten a license for WCW. Which, for people who don't remember, was an alternative wrestling league before they were purchased by WWF. And
they were really the like, it was WWF, not long later after that WWE, but at the time WWF, and then WCW was kind of the next one down, and then there was like ECW, NWO.
I thought those were all owned by the other companies.
I think they might have been, or they got rolled in. Wrestling's weird. It's a big thing. I'm sure guys probably yelling at us, but it's a big thing of like companies buying other companies. Right. Like even right now, like AEW owns Ring of Honor, which is another like lower tier wrestling thing.
It sounds like a budget Tom Cruise movie.
Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
It's the sequel to Real Steel. So, yeah, WCW is kind of the like Pepsi to WWF's Coke.
Yeah,
for people that weren't around in that era.
Right. And THQ actually lost the WCW license to EA back in 99, but at the same time they managed to get the WWF license from Acclaim. So the second they stopped making WCW games, they started making WWF games, and then less than 2 years after that, WCW would be bought by WWF anyway. So then they just ended up really winning in that whole situation.
Now, it's worth noting that before that all happened, their WCW games on N64 and PlayStation, specifically their N64 one,
they're very highly rated.
Well regarded, sold really well. Like if you just look up the cover art for WCW versus NWO World Tour, you'll recognize it. Like you have seen this cover.
Yeah, like I have no interest in wrestling, and yet I would constantly have friends bring over either just the games for N64 or their entire N64 console with the game. Excuse me, just to get us to play it as a group. And I played more of those games than I ever thought I would have. Yeah.
And this was also right in that era where Hulk Hogan was signed on to NWO.
Right.
And so he was wrestling for them. And it was weird. But my point was just that the WCW wrestling games they did were a big deal.
Yeah.
And sold. I imagine they have to be some of their best sellers of that entire era.
And also throughout THQ's life, whenever they were making wrestling games, one of the weirdest things that they did was they made different games on every platform. So even though they made a WCW game on PS1 and N64 the same year, it was a different game. It wasn't a port. It was a completely different game. And the same thing happened with WWF games when they got to the PS2 and the Xbox and the GameCube. They would release SmackDown on PS2 and Raw on Xbox. I don't remember what the fuck they did on GameCube, but I think it was WrestleMania on GameCube. But they would always have a different game on each console the same year. So they were pumping out 3 wrestling games every single year.
Thankfully, the rules of wrestling don't dramatically change between titles.
Right.
So I imagine there's some overlap.
Yeah, I'm sure there was some overlap, but I think some of the rosters changed and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Hulk Hogan has a bandana now, and it's black, so we gotta put that on him. So new game, we did it.
Gotta tighten that guy's Speedo in this one.
Tighten his Speedo. I don't know why I imagine him doing it with a big stick, and they just stick it in the back and twist it.
You gotta wind it up. Wind up his Speedo.
Worst possible fucking way to do that.
Call it the Nutcracker. Anyway.
So yeah, the wrestling games are a big deal.
Yeah, a bunch of wrestling.
That's my point.
So they did see a bunch of success from that, and that led to them trying to branch out and do some more stuff. They ended up signing their long-term exclusive contract with Nickelodeon in 2001, which led to a ton of games, mostly SpongeBob, but a lot of other stuff too.
I feel like there was a weird glut of Rugrats games.
Yep.
There was multiple
Rocket
Rugrats
Power
movies
games
that came out in the early 2000s. Rocket Power was a thing.
Yeah.
There was a good amount of weird Nickelodeon games.
And also part of that contract said that an original IP that THQ was creating would also get a Nickelodeon show, and it was a game called Tak and the Power of Juju.
Oh no, I forgot about Tak.
And the cartoon that was based on it didn't release until 4 years after the game.
Oh, jeez.
When THQ was, doing still pretty well, but the game was mostly forgotten by then.
Yeah. You think that the Mighty Number 9 cartoon is going to share the same fate, Saturn? What do you think?
It's hard to say. But also during this time, they started buying up development studios to make internal games. This is when you saw them buy Volition back in September 2000. They also bought Relic Entertainment and Vigil Games and Blue Tongue and Juice Games and Chaos Studios. And studios that, make some pretty decent stuff. Volition was who would go on to make the Red Faction games and stuff like that.
Yeah,
They also
Red Faction, Saints Row, Volition,
Right.
who just shut down
yeah,
in August of this year.
right. So there was quite a bit of stuff that they're releasing during that era. They also started working as kind of a publishing house in the early 2000s, where they would publish GBA games that were made by either Sega or Microsoft, who for some reason didn't want to publish their own GBA games, which just seems weird because that system printed money. But whatever. But
A lazy Saturn.
right, when you look at most of Sega's output on GBA, it has a THQ logo on it, just because Sega was too lazy to do it themselves.
Yeah.
But then their biggest year would end up being 2007, where they hit over $1 billion in revenue, which was nearing the revenue of Activision. Which that's huge. That's a shitload of money. And it's weird to think that THQ was one of the biggest publishers in the industry at one point. But they were in 2007.
And in addition, because I was looking at their 2007 games, so in addition to putting out, their regular shit,
Licensed stuff.
you still got, what is it, Drake and Josh. You still got MotoGP 07.
Right.
They also put out Drawn to Life, Stalker,
Yep.
Shadow of Chernobyl. There was they did the Titan Quest. They published Titan Quest.
Yep.
Supreme Commander came out in 2007. Like, there were some still to this day very beloved titles under their banner releasing. THQ also, I believe they published most, if not all, of the Company of Heroes stuff.
Yeah, they were doing
Which
Company
was,
of Heroes at that point.
Around that same era.
And prior to that, they had done stuff like Summoner and Red Faction and Saints Row, which had all done pretty well.
Yeah. So like THQ has published all of my favorite RTS games of all time. Growing up, I didn't know shit about them, but they did Company Heroes, and they did the Warhammer 40K Dawn of War, because they were both Relic.
Right.
And so they later in my life, they had a lot to do with a lot of the shit that I was playing.
Post THQ, you've gained an appreciation for their games.
Right. Long after the fact.
Right.
And really mostly just because of their association with Relic, who did the actual making of the games. But then also, I guess, Saints Row later, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get to that. The next generation, you get to the 360, the PS3, the Wii. You again see development costs start to spike, but they do have some successes with things like Saints Row and Darksiders. And because the development costs were going up, the cost of making all those licensed games was going up as well, obviously, because development costs were going up. But they were still in these long-term contracts, which a lot of these contracts said you have to release this many games per year per platform.
Yeah.
And when they were making games on GBA, that's really easy. But when you're making games on Xbox 360 and PS3, that gets really expensive really quickly. And if those games don't sell a ton of copies, they start to lose money. And so they started to lose money pretty heavily, mostly on their licensed games. And then the 2008 recession hit.
Yeah.
And also the release of the iPhone happened, which steered a lot of those casual games over to platforms like iPhone instead of Xbox 360, where they were already contractually obligated to be making them.
Right.
So they started laying off hundreds of employees, closing studios in 2008. And they hired this guy, Danny Bilson, who had previously worked at EA, to be the head of their new core gaming division that was pretty much designed to save the company. They kept telling their investors, don't worry about how much money we're losing on all these licensed games, because we're going to be making all this original IP. It's going to be geared towards core gamers, and it's going to completely save our company, right?
Yeah. And I think that given the context of the moment, that was the right move. I mean, at this point, they had some very, in air quotes, core gamer beloved franchises under their belts.
Right.
And they're like, it's interesting to see a company that started basically churning out licensed junk
Yeah.
and slowly veer into churning out really good beloved titles
Right.
and losing money on the licensed junk, which used to be the free pay. I mean,
Right.
back in the 90s,
Yeah, it was
licensed
just printing
games,
money for 'em.
It was free money, yeah. And then all of a sudden, the customer base got smarter. Is the or like you said, a lot of it did just go to iPhone, you
Right.
know. But leading up to that, I think a lot of it was just people maturing with gaming as a medium and getting smarter about realizing that, like, hey, Rugrats in Paris is probably not the most fantastic game of all time, because they probably just made it to sell it along with the movie.
And let me tell you something, Justin. That would have been the correct move to pivot towards core gaming. Instead, after telling their investors they were going to do that, they slashed the budget for their core gaming division. And they gave their casual license game division carte blanche to basically spend as much money as they want and sign even more long-term contracts. And around this time, the Australian division of THQ had been approached with this concept for a tablet for the Wii, which was pitched to them as an idea to make a sequel to Drawn to Life, but for the Wii, right?
Right. Which there had been Drawn to Life. It had seen like multiple re-release. It was a weird game.
Yeah.
Like, if memory serves, there have been weird re-releases on different platforms and stuff, but not a lot of like proper sequels.
Right. And there never was a proper sequel, despite the fact that they released this hardware specifically for it.
Yeah.
So the U-Draw was the tablet. It released in late 2010, and it sold out immediately, way beyond expectations. They ended up having to delay the European release of the tablet in order for more units to be produced. And at the release of the tablet, they only had a bundled drawing game, a platformer, and a port of Pictionary, and it still sold out instantly. Like, this was I completely missed this because I was not working in games retail and was not interested in this kind of Wii thing.
Yeah.
But this was apparently like a huge flash in the pan moment where they developed this tablet and it instantly started selling like hotcakes, right?
This is also in late 2010 is a weird era for the Wii to begin with, because this is the
twilight of the Wii, basically.
Yeah, this is when the Wii people, the kind of attitude around the Wii is like, oh yeah, that old thing that we used to play Wii Sports on. Like, that's how it was referred to by a lot of people.
It had gone from an interesting idea to, oh, that kid's console.
Oh yeah, that thing's still around.
Right.
You know, and I think a lot of it's just, there was a lot of media hype around the Wii.
Yeah.
Really weird media hype, which I'm sure we talked about on our Wii episode that I'm sure we've probably done, because we've just basically done everything.
Yeah.
And so there was a weird, this was a weird era for specifically like Wii accessories. So to have one that is succeeding as a Wii accessory in 2010 is very weird.
Right. Well, of course, this was still in the era of plastic guitars and stuff too. So I guess we weren't as afraid of weird accessories yet.
But the amount of shitty, dumb Wii accessories that were sitting on the shelf at GameStop in 2010, like
there was like there was 2 or 3 gondolas full of them.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
But it did succeed. It did way above expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And while the U-Draw is selling very, very well for the casual division in THQ, a lot of the upper brass at THQ is complaining about how the core gaming division has these really long development times and really expensive games.
Oh, you don't say.
Right? They ended up rushing Homefront out the door before it was even done.
Yeah.
And it got lambasted in the reviews. It did end up, making money in the end, but it still got lambasted in the reviews. And there were fights internally about whether or not there should even be budgets allocated to games like Darksiders 2 and South Park: The Stick of Truth, which
2 beloved games,
right? And also they were developing a Warhammer MMO internally. It was going to be their first MMO, and it was going way over budget because it's an MMO. Right? And management was freaking out and ended up canceling it in the end, but they were very upset about how long it was taking and how many people they kept trying to hire to support this MMO, as if you need support staff for an MMO.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's and because they in addition to the Dawn of War games, there were other Warhammer games that they had worked on. There seems
Right.
to have been a pretty strong relationship between them
Games Workshop
and
and-
Games Workshop, or at least Games Workshop's software division.
Right,
Although I think
right.
in this era it was all just the same big fucking company.
Yeah.
They published the Warhammer 40K Engage game that I'm sure we all remember. Everyone remembers that one
yeah,
really
definitely.
good Warhammer 40K Engage game.
So the sad part here is while they're fighting against games like South Park: The Stick of Truth, which we all know was a massive success once it did release,
Yep.
management greenlit the same U-Draw tablet but ported to PS3 and 360.
Perfect.
Now, the PS3 and the 360 don't have Wiimotes, so they had
don't
to
say.
build the gyro sensor into the remote, which made it much more expensive.
Well, the PS3 had the
The six
weird
axis.
lollipops. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's true. It had the
they-
move
they had
controllers,
little-
yeah.
The move controllers, yeah.
But they didn't really snap into a tablet.
True. This is true.
So the tablets ended up costing more. They only ever made 3 games for them. All of them were ports of Wii games. And also there was just no demand for a U-Draw tablet for PS3 and 360.
Yeah.
And they never even sold the initial shipment. They sent out 2.5 million of these HD versions of the tablets, which is 40% more than they had sold in total of the Wii version of the tablet. And they sold less than half of them. The rest of them sat in a warehouse.
Could you imagine how much money they would have made instead if they just finished the Warhammer MMO?
Yeah, or South Park. If they had released South Park, they probably could have made back that money. So sadly, this is the end of their story. You have in their last couple of years, you had games like Saints Row the Third, WWE 12, and Homefront all making a lot of money, but the cost of that HD U-Draw tablet put them in such deep debt that they couldn't pay it off.
Yeah.
And when they informed their investors of it, their stock dropped by over 80%. And they ended up closing the entire casual and licensed game division at that point, which way too late at this point. And a lot of their games ended up being delayed, like Company Heroes 2 and Metro Last Night and South Park: Stick of Truth. And because of those delays, they decided to pour as much money as they could into the advertising of Darksiders 2 to try to get something to make them money. But they spent so much on advertising it that the game's sales didn't meet the advertising budget.
What?
And
oh, no way.
So they end up filing for bankruptcy in December of 2012, and they had a plan to sell the company in bankruptcy to this investor group, but a judge denied that acquisition. So they ended up being properly disbanded and liquidated and selling everything off. Most of their IP was either bought by Deep Silver, things like Saints Row and Metro and Homefront, or Nordic Games, who bought Darksiders and Red Faction and Destroy All Humans, as well as...
Sega bought a good chunk of stuff.
True, Sega bought a bunch of their PC games, but a lot of their big properties were bought by either Deep Silver or Nordic Games. At the end there.
I think, because I was looking at the list, Take-Two got some stuff.
Yep.
Sega really got the Relic video games.
Yes.
The
Sega bought
Company Heroes
Relic,
and
I
stuff.
believe, as well as all of their properties.
Yeah. How sad.
Yeah. And then, just as a brief mention, the new THQ.
Yes, THQ Nordic.
Yes. So in June of 2014, Nordic Games announced that they had acquired the THQ trademark and started to publish some games under the THQ logo. And in 2016, they rebranded their company to THQ Nordic. And then they began aggressively acquiring other studios, including Koch Media, who owned Deep Silver, which brought a lot of THQ's properties back under one roof.
Yeah,
and then
we talked about this on the show. This was this moment of like, hey, is THQ kind of reforming?
Right. And then in September of 2019, THQ Nordic changed their name to Embracer Group and left the former Nordic Games division named THQ Nordic for continuity. And then they continued to aggressively acquire everything they could for many years. until they had a $2 billion deal fall through earlier this year and ended up having to divest or close studios and lay off people. And it looks a lot like the end of the last THQ right now.
You know, like when you look at and I guess this is getting into final thoughts, but looking at THQ as a whole, it's easy to be like, who fucking cares?
Right.
Because it's like 90% licensed garbage, Waldo games, wrestling, the Wild Thornberries video games.
Right.
But then buried in there is like Saints Row, Company of Heroes, Red Faction.
Yeah.
Like there's some really, really... And among those licensed games, there are some beloved licensed games kind of mixed in there, you know.
Yeah.
But there's so many cool things. They did that one really good 360 PS3 Conan game. That was awesome. The Supreme Commander was them. Like they have done, published a lot of really, you know, I hate to use the term that they use, but, you know, core gamer properties.
And it felt like they were going in a correct trajectory for a long time there. And it was like from the outside perspective, looking into it, it feels like it was their over-reliance and their dependence on that licensed game division that ended up collapsing them from the inside. Like if they had started to realize just a few years earlier that it was not going to be profitable anymore, they probably could have continued to succeed in some way through today. Maybe they would have merged with the 100 companies the way that the industry goes these days. But they might not have had to completely dissolve. And unfortunately, they just clung on to all those licensed games just way too long. And then they made those shitty U-Draw tablets for PS3 and 360.
And bankrupted themselves. The first time. Their last listed game on Wikipedia by date was Voltron Defender of the Universe. Came out in 2011 and has a game rankings score of mid 50%.
Well, they must have done stuff after that because they didn't bankrupt until December of 2012. And
that's what I was thinking.
I think Darksiders was 2012.
That's the last thing listed on their Wikipedia for whatever reason.
I always go with GameFAQs when I'm looking for a list of games by a specific publisher.
Yeah, that probably would be a better list.
So
than
let's
this
see.
list.
What does GameFAQs say their last games were? Wheel of Fortune on Wii U.
That's not better. It's not better, Saturn.
Jeopardy on Wii U. And Darksiders 2. It looks like it was their last big one, and then just some Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and WWE games in those last couple of months.
Darksiders 2 was a really good Zelda game.
Yeah.
I've not played the first one, and I've heard the same thing, that it is also a really good Zelda game, but Darksiders 2 was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I had a really good time. I played that on a Wii U.
I have them both, and I keep meaning to give them a shot. I just haven't gotten around to it.
I mean, to be clear, they're 3D Zelda games.
Right, which is less my style.
Yeah, less exciting for you.
However, the theming and styling of Darksiders 2 looks like it's more interesting to me, just because it's goofy
fun.
And dark.
It's fun because it's that level of like pitch black where it completely buys into its own pitch blackness, and it never tips its cards to be like, all right, we know it's kind of goofy. So it's so dead serious that the melodrama just gets so fucking stupid. Like, you literally are Death. Like, that's your name. People are like, hey, Death! Like, it's so fucking stupid.
Here's another one of their real late releases. Per Pals: Perfection for 3DS.
Oh, boy. Man, that classic title.
It says right on the cover, you can raise your own cuddly kittens, Justin.
It's again, it's hard to get too worked up about publishers. I think publishers in general are kind of a boring, not fun idea. You know, they're often treated by us and everyone, and rightfully so, as kind of the corporate necessary function of game development. You know, like, you want to make a game, well, someone's got to publish it. So I can't say I feel too terribly that a publisher has gone under, because publishers going to do what publishers do.
I do feel bad for the people who kept getting laid off there and are now getting
Same.
laid off again.
God, could you imagine? There's got to be so many people that are like, oh, THQ is back, and they got back on. Oh, it's so exciting. And then they're like, oh, shit. Just wait till they're like, hold on, what if we make a U-Draw for the Switch? I think this might turn it around.
And you know, we mentioned in the news today that Free Radical ceased operations recently, and that's also a division of Embracer Group.
Yeah.
Which
fucking
is
Embracer Group.
Another casualty of Neo THQ.
So Embracer Group, as far as we know, which is basically the animated husk of some bits of THQ somewhere, right. You know, in the grand scheme of like, you know, the Katamari ball, like there is still that first like thumbtack you rolled up in there, right? Yeah. That's Embracer Group. You're about to send it off to be a star, and there's that one thumbtack in the fucking middle that you picked up first.
Yeah. But like, in your Katamari parallel metaphor, right now Embracer Group is just running into that stair step that they aren't big enough to climb yet, and all these studios are just flying out of it.
Like, how fucked is Embracer right now? Do we know how fucked they are? Are they just like
they're
super
$2 billion in the hole from that deal that fell through, so who the fuck knows?
I want to be on record as stating that I don't think either of us ever really trusted them, because they got a lot of, you know, back padding from the industry when they were like, we've got a big library of games, and you're like, cool, I guess. I'd like quit buying everything, please.
And then they arbitrarily bought Tomb Raider for way less than it was worth.
I fucking forgot about that. What the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's THQ. Weird, and still has an animated corpse out there somewhere. Gobbling things up as animated corpses tend to do. But, you know, very strange.
Yeah, it's just a strange, sad history.
What a weird fucking hill to die on, the U-Draw.
Right?
This is it, boys. We're going down with the ship on the U-Draw.
At least we got out Pictionary.
At least everyone got to play Wheel of Fortune. Thank goodness. Oh, yeah.
Could you imagine if they had released a U-Draw on the Wii U that already came with the tablet?
Yeah,
that would have been
that.
That would have been the only dumber possible idea.
The kind of stupid shit that they would do.
Right.
And if you like people with dumb ideas doing stupid shit, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/retrowarriors. You can hear all of our dumb ideas.
Yeah.
We have lots of them, and we share them prodigiously. I talked about Christmas donkeys for 10 minutes in this episode's pre-show. And Talking Wizards is apparently mostly about superheroes these days, although we did spend 40 minutes dissecting a single Disney movie called Johnny Tsunami about a kid that's a surfer, but then he moves to a mountain to become a snowboarder. Oh. And I'd never seen the movie.
I've never heard of this.
But if you want to hear possibly the most in-depth discussion of Johnny Tsunami by someone who knows the film really well and someone who still has never seen it, then Talking Wizards is probably the only place you'll ever find that.
Don't say that. I'm sure there's a deep dive on YouTube.
Into Johnny Tsunami. We want to thank the following patrons for their kind donations, starting with Jose Rodriguez.
And Patrick Manfredi.
Rantic.
Epic Da Vinci.
Hamha, it is I, Napiki the hamster.
Okay. Joystick Cowboy.
Thimble.
Riker looks way better without a beard. You lie.
Saturn.
Don't you make me say these lies.
Matthew Guiraud.
And David Allen.
All the patrons we want to thank for giving us money. Just give us money.
Making us lie.
If you want to make us lie. I was listening to NPR is doing their like yearly pledge drive right now. And so they're all what they've learned is if you just turn the radio on and hear them being like, welcome to our pledge drive, you immediately turn it off.
Exactly. Yes.
So now they like sneak it in.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, oh, well, today, you know, on All Things Considered, we're going to be talking about such and such and da-da-da-da-da-da. And if this is all stuff that you like, then you can support us.
Right.
And you're like, wait a minute, this is a crummy ad. You know, like you don't realize it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to start going with.
Yeah, I think we've already been there. I think they're copying us, Justin.
I keep patiently waiting for one of them to get frustrated and just do what we do and just be like, "Give us money, please give us money. I like money."
I heard one of the guys at the local NPR affiliate the other day during their pledge drive. He was saying, and then coming up next on what day is it? And he was just like trying to find the schedule and find out what was coming up next.
Oh my god, what?
It's great.
I guess
live on the
drive
air.
ain't going great. Fuck, what day is it? NPR is what I listen to find out what day it is. This isn't good, Saturn. This isn't good, man.
I think our local NPR station is going okay. Just that one guy may have had one too many shifts.
We should do a pledge drive. I think we do great. We do like a 24-hour marathon pledge drive. We could have the big meter on the wall.
But what I'm not going to do is the whole Ira Glass thing where I guilt people into giving me money because I hate that.
We could threaten people into giving us money.
Yeah, that's fine.
Give us money or else.
Give us money or we'll punch Pablo repeatedly in the gut.
Bring him out. Wheel him out onto the stage.
Bring out
Why, you guys?
Why are you doing this to me?
Anyway, that's the show, I guess.
You people want to save Pablo, right?
If you want to save Pablo, give us money and we won't hurt him. Oh, it got dark. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.